I know you've probably been thinking to yourself, why don't they have more podcasts about businessmen and contractors? You've got stuff about teachers and teaching and students and the economy and all kinds of things, politics, you name it. Well, when was the last time you saw a podcast about business and contractors? Probably never. Well, here we go now. There is a lot to learn here that you have never heard before. Stay tuned as I have a conversation with real people with Ken. Welcome back to Conversations with Real People at Individualist Unite. I am the radical individualist, otherwise, I go by Chip. You can see all of these podcasts at individualistunite.com or individualistunite.substack.com. And of course, at this point, I have to verify that the person in front of me here is, in fact, a real person. Are you, Ken, a real person?
Chip, last time I checked, yes, I am.
I'll just have to take your word for that. We don't need any signed statement. We're not like that.
That's okay.
Okay. One more little thing, because some people know that this is the point where I present to Ken one of my books, 2084, The Reawakening, available at Amazon for anybody who wants it. So there you go.
Thank you very much, Chip. I'm looking forward to reading it.
I think you will enjoy
I
it.
know I'll enjoy it.
All right. How do I know Ken? We've known each other for many years because we were neighbors, not in the neighborhood, but neighbors in business, in the building, not in the same business, but both contractors. So, because podcasts all over the place talk about who knows what, politics, education, all that neat stuff. Nobody talks about contractors. Nobody talks about businessmen. At least they don't talk it from the viewpoint of the businessman. So
Small businessman.
small for sure. Yeah, neither one of us is president of Ford Motor Company or
No.
anything. Yeah, maybe later.
But
Later,
I did have the title of president of my company.
I was president
As
of my
small as it was,
I was president of my vast empire. Yes.
but sometimes Joe and I, were partners, and we did share that even with our people.
Yeah, yeah.
Somebody wants to be president for the day, so be
Yeah, yeah. Congratulations, you're president. First thing we're
That's
going to
right.
do is impeach you. Yes. Okay, so I don't. Did you want to start, or do you want me to start? I just really would like to talk about things that I think most people just don't even have a clue.
That's fine, Chip. No, you could fire away.
Okay. Well, one thing I pointed out on occasion is I was a teacher for 6 years, and then I became a contractor. And as a teacher, you're the boss of the classroom, so it's kind of like the boss is the boss of employees at a business.
That's right.
So I thought I got it, uh, but then you become an employer and you have employees who looked a lot like my former students, but the relationship is different. As a students, if they pass, if they fail, they do great, if they do terrible, I get paid. Doesn't matter. So that's one
That's right.
viewpoint. When you're an employer and the employees fail, it comes out of your pocket, as you well know. That changes your whole attitude about productivity and showing up on time,
Mhm.
doing the work that's supposed to be
Mhm.
done.
That's right.
So that was my experience, was finding out, and it had the experience with students. So many of them did so poorly, didn't turn in the homework, did the wrong page, wrong assignment, whatever. It's like, okay, I'll get paid. Well, now they're doing the same, having the same attitude, and all of a sudden it's coming out of my pocket. So it does change your attitude, and you never hear anybody talk about that on a podcast
Hmm. Hmm.
or anywhere that I know of.
Hmm.
Uh, got anything to add to
Well,
that?
I understand where you're coming from as a teacher, and then um, transitioning into business for yourself. And like you, I did not start as a young man in business. I started in the corporate world
Mhm.
and had a long 20-year career with a very large global company. And so my experiences were a little bit different than yours in regard to, I wasn't a teacher. I was an account manager, sales rep for a large company. It was the Eastman Kodak company.
Mhm.
And my path uh, took me from traveling all over the country as different assignments came my way. I was not so much asked, but I was pretty much told if I wanted to keep my job, I would have to move on, which I did. Well, happily. My wife wasn't happy about it because it was difficult to move. We were, even though we were very young, it was my early 20s when we started this venture, and I um, enjoyed the corporate world. It was engaging. There was challenging. I was in an industry that I had absolutely no prior knowledge. I went into the medical X-ray business with Eastman Kodak Company, which, uh, to their credit, they gave an enormous amount of training to me as an individual for like people management, sales ability, and just different lots of different types of training through a long period of time. And uh, but fast forward, because I was with the company for 20 years and lived in 4 or 5 states. And as most people that are watching this podcast or listening, uh, if they're over the age of 35, 40, they would know the name Eastman Kodak or Kodak, the little yellow box.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't exist anymore. And obviously, there's a long litany of reasons for that.
Yeah.
When I joined the company in 1981, it was already 101 years old.
Yeah.
It's a very old company.
Because Eastman was the first one to, I think, make a basic camera that a normal person could just use.
What George Eastman did not develop, did not invent photography.
Right.
He perfected it for the masses.
Yep. Just like Ford made the Model T.
Exactly.
He didn't invent
He
anything
didn't-
about a car. He
No.
made a car that you could afford to
He
buy.
simply, these were the main industrialists of the modern world
Yeah.
that brought tens of thousands of people jobs, and
Yeah.
that creates a whole nother.
Dell Computers, I know, was one of the first guys, Michael Dell, to take what everybody already knew how to do and put it in a package and say,
Right.
here you go.
So these are
Yeah.
these guys just took the apple and polished it,
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. But my path to business was um, not necessarily. I mean, I always wanted to be in business, and I was in my late 30s when then the writing was on the wall that Eastman Kodak Company was probably not going to be around by the time I was going to be retiring, which was another 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, I have a young family, and my wife worked in the home. She was instrumental in raising our children. Obviously, she was excellent at it. Uh, but she didn't have a paying job. She had a very difficult job, but she didn't have a paying job.
Mhm.
So I'm like, okay, do I want to, as I see this migration of Kodak changing, and pretty much, we had reached the top of the curve and we're on the
Yeah.
downside.
Yeah.
And uh, an opportunity. I saw an opportunity to get into a business that I had to purchase, and I actually purchased a license. I really didn't buy a business; I bought a piece of a business, and I went into the specialty concrete business. But it was a huge leap of faith, but I took it because I figured if I couldn't make it work, I could always go back into the corporate world and into corporate sales with some company. I had
to ask you real quick, because that's not just a leap of faith, that's a leap period, because you went, like you said, from sales to contracting, basically the waiting in the concrete, was there something that pulled you towards that, or did you just say, oh, well, what the hell, let's give it a shot?
A little bit of both. I didn't have any knowledge of running a small business. I mean, I knew I had the skills, the people skills to deal with people.
Mhm.
And that was through years of training with Kodak and lots of experience in dealing with customers, of wide variety of customers, mostly large hospitals where we're dealing with
Mhm.
radiologists and CEOs or administrators of different levels and purchasing people. So I knew I had a business acumen, but I wasn't.
Well, you had the sales acumen. That's still not business acumen.
Yes, I did. And I had confidence in myself
Mhm.
that I could make this work, because I didn't. Where I started my company, I had to buy the license from an individual, and it was quite expensive. I took a my wife and I took a huge risk because 4 young children, I'm going to leave the corporate world because I knew I was going to leave anyway because everybody, the industry was changing so quickly, the company was changing so quickly. It was going to happen that my job was going to be eliminated at some point. And I could see it happening over a period of 5 or 6 years. So if I'm not proactive, then I'll have to be reactive. So I was proactive, and we saw this opportunity, and I talked it over with my wife, and I pretty much put everything we had at risk, with the exception of our home. I wasn't going to put our home on.
Not mortgage the house against the business.
I did not want to do that. I did everything else.
I get that.
I did everything else. I took every dollar I had, to include the money that we had saved for our kids' educations. And on one cold February day in 1999, I wrote a check for well into six figures. And I didn't borrow money from anybody with the exception of my dad. And my dad also I got the feeling my dad had the confidence in me and was happy to help. And I never really asked for help prior to that. And he was retired and was able to do so. And we started and we went into business. And I'm like, okay, here I am. And where we go from here?
But it worked out.
It did, but it was, I don't know. I could tell you why it worked out initially financially, because even though I was in business, I was also still employed for the first almost 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So I basically had two full-time jobs, running a business and still working for Eastman Kodak Company. So, I mean, I worked long days, and I did my job every day with Kodak. What allowed me to do that was that I was independent. I guess work from home. You know, even though I always work from home with Eastman Kodak Company because I was in field sales, and as a field sales rep, I was pretty much in control of my schedule every day. And I always worked every day. I didn't go to the movies. I didn't go shopping. I didn't go out to lunch. It was with customers. I always spent my time, my daily work with my customers as I was supposed to. Just when I started my business, I was just floating back and forth multiple times during the day. It was just the way I did it. And I would change my clothes 2 or 3 times a day because at that time, as a representative of Eastman Kodak Company, I was to wear a suit and a tie, which I did. So I would go from a concrete job in the morning to a Kodak project in the afternoon and vice versa. And I would change 2 or 3 times a day in my van.
Yeah, it's hard for me I didn't know all of that about you as far as doing both at once, because you did have, early on, you had employees or partners.
I did.
But you were supervising them, or?
Yes, very much. Oh, absolutely. Well, the first year I was in business, I did not have a partner. So in 1999, I started the company. I worked by myself as the owner. So I had at that time 3 full-time employees. And when I needed additional help, because when you're on a concrete project, it takes more than 3 people typically. And we were doing projects for Walmart and McDonald's, and as a function of when I purchased the license, a lot of this work didn't just come to us, but we were, as holding this license, we were held in very high regard we had a really good shot at competing for the business. And because the general contractors that were hiring the subcontractors that we were, looked and took that license and took it very seriously, that we held that license.
Let me cut in again. So how did you get that license? Did you just come up with the money, or did they say, hold on a minute, we got to make sure you can do this?
The license came to me when I purchased the license from a previous holder. I still had to go to the company in California. It was called Bowmanite, and Bowmanite had to approve that transfer of that license to me.
Mhm.
But the license was held by the previous owner, was right down the street again from where we first met, was Houston Brothers.
Yeah.
And then I bought the license from Houston Brothers and created Tri-State Bowmanite. Houston Brothers continued in business doing what they did in building restoration. I simply bought the specialty concrete portion of his business,
Mhm.
and I had the license from Bowmanite to do that. So, and that's where it was very expensive. And I had to use every resource that I had personally to acquire it.
Yeah. Okay, I get the money part, but I'm still a little confused about you spent your time repping for Eastman,
Correct.
and now you're a concrete
Correct.
contractor. You can't flip that around in a week. How did you get that kind of
Because
ability?
because it was already the company that had that owned the license previously
Mhm.
was doing this work.
Okay. So you had some of their employees at that point?
Yes, when I started, 3 employees came over
Okay,
from
okay.
Houston Brothers
Mhm.
to Tri-State Bowmanite that I created in February of 1999.
Right.
We had started the process to acquire the company in mid 1998.
Okay.
All right, so when Tri-State Bowmanite started officially February 1st, 1999, 3 employees came over from Houston Brothers, and I acquired the license. 3 men came over from Houston Brothers to my company, and when I needed additional labor for larger projects, which we did, uh, there were 3 or 4 guys that would come over from Houston Brothers, the prior
Temporarily,
owner of
yeah,
the
yeah.
license,
Okay.
that would work.
So yeah, that's a good way in. Yeah.
It was. To me, it was logical because I didn't have an enormous amount of experience in the concrete business prior to owning this company and starting this company. And prior to buying the license, I had no experience,
Mhm.
zero. All I had was a little bit of confidence that I could get it done, confidence in myself.
Yeah.
And my dad helped me estimate. My wife was taking care of our kids. So I didn't have to worry about, going to get the kids after
Mhm.
school. My wife was instrumental
Mhm.
in this.
Yeah. And now you said your dad helped you with estimating because that's a big giant part of contracting.
My
Too
dad,
low, you're screwed. Too high, you're not getting the job.
exactly.
So
Right.
who taught you to estimate and get it
Well,
right?
uh, when I acquired the company, the previous owner was, in theory, was supposed to assist me in helping me with this. And as I found out right away, he wasn't quite so interested in, once he got the cash, not that he was finished with me, but I realized every time I asked him a question, he would send me an invoice. So he wasn't exactly he wasn't really there
He want
helping
he
me.
wanted to be a paid consultant then.
And I'm thinking, wait a
Yeah,
second, I'm
yeah,
paying you to consult.
yeah.
So after the 2 or 3 times of getting pinched, now I wasn't making a lot of money with the company at that time. Very little. Actually, I made nothing. Paid myself nothing the first year because I couldn't afford to.
Mhm.
I'm paying him for the back up just for a second. On day one, I wrote him a very large check, but I still owed him several $100,000, which was needed to be paid over a period of 5 years on a scheduled basis.
Mhm.
All right. And I was making those payments annually. Once a year, I'd make a very large payment to him. So we would get the work, and then I would retain as much as I could after paying my employees because I knew I was going to have to make a payment to this gentleman,
Yeah.
which I took very seriously,
Mhm.
and pay my dad. So how did I do it? I just had people around me. The 3 men were loyal. They would show up every day. And then the gentleman, the 2 or 3 guys that would come over from Houston Brothers, the previous company,
Mhm.
would help me when the projects would get larger, and then I would pay them through Houston Brothers, through the previous company.
Mhm.
And my employees every week. One thing I'm very proud of in the 20-year period that I owned the business, I never missed a payroll ever.
Mhm.
And I
That's
ne-
dangerous if you don't.
and
You know.
I
Yeah.
we know what that means when if you miss a payroll, there's an immediate red flag to your employees, like what's going on
Yeah.
here, and it doesn't take very long, and I didn't borrow money to make the pay. I never borrowed money to make the payroll. If anybody never got paid, it was always me.
Well, yeah.
Okay, always me. I never put my employees in harm's way because without employees, and I'm not a concrete finisher. I could go out and labor on a project, but I could never, ever, ever do that work by myself.
Hmm.
I could sit there and watch and admire it, and I can go out and labor, but I can never do it on my own.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Okay. Yeah, it's contrast with me because where you went in cold, I went in already woodworking, partially a woodworking contractor plus other woodworking. Anyway, woodworking entirely.
It's in your DNA, Chip.
Yeah,
You're
it
you're
was. It
you're a
was.
world.
I mean,
You are world class in terms of
well, thank you.
your skill
Yeah,
set,
yeah.
and I could attest to that without any argument.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say my earliest memories are messing with stuff. I mean, I was 3 years old and swinging that little rubber wooden mallet into the thing, pound, pound, pound with a little kid's toy. Anything had to do with fabricating anything, manipulating anything from my earliest memories, I was into it. So by the time I was in business, and I did not have the big grand plan that you had, I just kind of said, I'm not teaching anymore. So what the hell am I doing? uh, so someone's like, how the hell did I end
I
up
don't want to
here? But
interrupt you. I didn't have a grand plan. I just wanted to make. I wanted to. I did want to be in business, and I wanted to raise my family. I wanted my children to have opportunity.
Mhm.
I never had like I couldn't see 20 years down the road in 1999 when I was starting this company. I was just hopeful and optimistic
Mhm.
and took risk and had confidence in myself and my family around me and the people that helped me.
And they say all kinds of things along the lines if you make your own breaks. So when it comes down to luck, there's an expression for that, like you make your own luck. But there's been other expressions, basically, what another stop everything here while I think about it. One person's failure is another person's temporary setback. Some people say, I've had it, I've
Oh,
tried. And
sure.
another person will take that same experience and say, it'll make them stronger and more capable.
I can only recall maybe on one hand in 20 years where I really wanted to just say, I'm done.
Hmm.
I'll find another job, find something to do. When I got the job at Kodak, I had a business degree from a small Catholic college in upstate New York, Western New York, and here I am working for Eastman Kodak Company, representing, one of the world's renowned companies at the time
Hmm.
in an industry I had no knowledge of. I went in the medical X-ray business. I came out with a marketing degree, you know. So I was trained to do that. Unfortunately, when I went into business, I had to train myself, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that, which is fine. I mean, it wasn't when you're dealing. What's hard about it? You have to get work, complete the work, pay your employees, and go on to the next one.
Yeah. So that's what's hard about it.
I'm not underestimating
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
but it's like anything else. If you're diligent and you apply yourself and you don't, not that failure's not an option, but it's what
Yeah.
it takes. You just have to
Yeah.
apply
It
yourself. And
takes.
and I know a lot of people like you and like me. I have a lot of friends that are small business people. It's all about applying yourself and
Yeah.
never giving up.
And I'll even say that about just skilled tradesmen. They may not be in business for themselves, but they are given the parameters that say, here's the project, here's the drawings, here's whatever it is, make it happen. And you got guys with high school diplomas, maybe possibly not even that, who can handle it, and they'll take it on and they'll
Well,
see it through. And if there's an issue, they don't go home, dear me. They go get the help they need, the advice they need.
and and that was never my strong suit.
Mhm.
Okay, I just knew from a big picture standpoint, if I had the right guys in the right place at the right time and the opportunity to get work, get projects to come into us, I knew I can get it done. And after, and this goes back, remember earlier I said that I started this by myself. Um, and I'm in it for the first year and I'm like, wow, this is hard. Okay. And then, I'm like, and I think our first year we did maybe generated maybe $300,000 in revenue. Sounds like a lot.
Mhm.
My costs were very high.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had employees, I had materials, I had debt. And so it's like there was nothing left at the end of the day.
You try to grab some of the money for yourself as it goes by.
No, I never did.
Yeah,
And until the company was paid for, I pretty much did not do that. And the only reason where I am definitely fortunate is I had a job in a big company
Mhm.
that paid very well that allowed me to do this.
Yeah.
Because I didn't go to work every day to an office where, I'm under a microscope. I still got my job done. My job was at that point in my life. I'd been doing it for 20 years and it was relatively, take care of your customers.
Straightforward anyway. Or
Okay.
understandable what you're supposed to do.
All right. So I don't have to, I'm not,
Yeah.
I see my customers and what I really did is I saw my key customers and I just maintained my business.
Yeah.
I didn't try to grow it, which was probably not the right thing to do. But at that time, I could see this. I wasn't going to retire from the Eastman Kodak Company
Yeah.
in 1999. There was just no way.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. And I had friends there who were saying, "Do you think we could make it to retirement?" I'm like, one of my favorite, I shouldn't say this, but I said Stevie Wonder could read the writing on the wall. This is not
Stevie Wonder, the blind singer for you younger folks.
So, so here we are. And so after the first year of being in business, I was still able to get the projects. And again, with that license to do this work, we were afforded a lot of really good opportunities that came my way.
Mhm.
I paid for that though by buying this license. And one of my favorites, well, there were two large companies that everybody will know even today, um, where we had a lot of opportunity. And one of them was Walmart. Okay. And Walmart at that time in the late 90s and the early 2000s was in a major expansion. And they were closing all their stores that were a 55,000 square foot footprint. And they were moving into these super centers, 210,000 square feet. So the small town, they would abandon a 55,000 square foot store in a shopping center and then go to the edge of town, buy 30 or 40 acres or 50 acres and build this monstrosity.
Mhm.
All right. And every one of these stores had an entrance, and the entrances were all specialty concrete, which is the industry that I was in.
Mhm.
And I was one of the three companies, or Bowmanite was one of the three companies that was listed as a possible
Mhm.
contractor to do this work.
Yeah.
They
And let
wouldn't.
me jump in on that for people who don't understand is um, architects release the drawings to the general contractors that
Correct.
bid the job, and
That's correct.
frequently will specify who is allowed to bid as a subcontractor. And for that matter, the contractors have to be approved to be a contractor. But then oftentimes there's approved subcontractors, and if you go outside of those bounds, you're walking in quicksand. So if it says you can accept Bowmanite bids, you accept Bowmanite bids.
Right.
That's how that works.
That's
Yeah.
that's
So
exactly right. And I have worked, I think between 1999 and 2004, we may have done 30, 40 Walmart stores. And we would travel. We traveled as far as Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, um, Illinois. I mean, so we traveled extensively during those years. And but we were only gone for a week at a time. But
mhm.
and but I realized after my first year that I don't know if I possess the skills to take this to where I really wanted to go. We were fortunate enough in my first year, and another big project that we got. A lot of people may have heard of. They may not have heard of Churchill Downs, but they would have heard of what happens at Churchill Downs. It's called the Kentucky Derby.
Mhm.
Okay, only it's been running. At that 1999, I think it had been running for 125 years or 130 years consecutively. The first Saturday in May, and my company was selected to do all the specialty concrete work in the main entrance of Churchill Downs. At that time, I was running the business by myself. Okay, and we get this project. It's quite large. And I'm like, how do I get this done with me and three guys? It's not going to happen. All right. So that's when I went to Houston Brothers, and one of the key guys at Houston Brothers, his name is Joe. Joe um, would come and help at, at the discretion of the previous owner
Mhm.
and help me on projects during the first year. This is in the first year. So we get this project, and then I had tapped into other Bowmanite contractors across the state of Ohio, and I was able to assemble enough guys to go down and do this project. We got it done, thank the good Lord. But it took a lot
How
of
many guys was enough guys? About.
10.
Okay.
You need a lot of when you're pouring concrete. It's not a do-it-yourself project.
And you
And a large.
definitely have a time restraint, obviously.
Well, we had time, we had weather.
Mm.
You know, I think we started the end of February 19, or it's probably March. And, the Derby is always the first Saturday in May. And I had these dreams like, well, this year we're going to have to make it the second Saturday because the Bowmanite guys didn't get their work done. But
Yeah.
believe me, when you get on a project like that, they're highly organized. This was at that time they were building the Kentucky Derby Museum. I think the budget on the project was a little over 100 million. So these are not small numbers, and they're highly organized. The contractor is very regimented, and we had to fall in the line, and we
Sure.
did,
Yeah.
and we did. And at that point, that's when I went to Joe, and I had the harebrained idea. That wasn't a harebrained idea at all. It was a great idea. Joe,
Check out part 2 of Conversations with Real People with Ken to find out a little bit more about it, what it takes to be successful in business. And then you too can have the fun and the joy of being your own boss. Stay tuned.